Okay. Wait, now go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Chris Allen. I am pleased to be your moderator today for today's first session called The Ghosts of Former Mines. We have 3 presentations today, but first a couple of Zoom-related requests. If you have questions for the panelists, and we hope that you do, please keep them for the question and answer discussion at the end of this session. You can also send a written question to me and the host, that is Karen, of this session using Zoom's chat feature. And finally, please keep your mic muted. That's your mic icon is at the lower left of your screen if you are not presenting or asking a question. Thank you for that. And our first panelist today is Trish Hackett Nicola of Seattle. Trish is a genealogist who writes and lectures about Pacific Northwest history. And today she will be taking us to Lost River on the Seward Peninsula. Trish, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, share my screen.
Yeah, share your screen. Okay, yeah. Okay, now.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My research started with a court case from the estate of Leslie L. Krim, a case which took 43 years to resolve. While researching Krim's life, I found details of a court case, information on his tin mining partners, and the history of the Lost River Tin Mining Company. I'll share some of this with you today. Oops, it's not working. Nope. Technical glitch. It's my. So should I stop?
Yeah, stop sharing. Go to your.
We were able to see the screen, your PowerPoint, so that part was working.
Yeah,
Well, it wasn't advanced. Oops, it wasn't.
Escape.
It wasn't advancing. So.
Right, but we at least saw
Okay.
the
Now
picture.
go back.
That helps.
Go back to your.
Here.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Now go to share screen. Now there. Now start. Okay, now advance.
Okay, so. Nope.
Still not working?
It's not working. This is not a good computer day.
No. As I say, we can see your.
But it's not advancing.
No, I know, but we at least have. It's not that it's all not working. It's only half not working.
Well, it's a big half.
I know. And I can't help you on that one.
Okay, well,
So good thing you have your consultant.
okay, we're gonna, it'll get there. Just hang in there.
I've not ever had that problem with PowerPoint.
It hasn't happened any other time today, but yeah, I guess.
Okay, we'll try again. Okay, now try.
Okay, okay, it's working.
Yay, okay.
Okay, this is the view looking down Cassiterite Creek to the Lost River Valley where tin was discovered. In 1903, when Leslie Krim, Charles Rant, and William O'Brien discovered tin on the Lost River in the Seward Peninsula, they staked a claim and incorporated the Lost River Tin Mining Company. They made a fortune from the mine, and the mine was in operation off and on until 1955. The Lost River starts in the York Mountains on the Seward Peninsula and flows south for 10 miles to the Bering Sea. It has 2 tributaries, Tin Creek and Cassiterite Creek. According to a government report, the Lost River tin mines were easy to reach by a good roadbed and were readily accessible to the coast and water transportation. No expensive packing or trail cutting was required. Boats put into the harbor and the ore could be shipped at small cost. Lost River carried an abundance of water. Mines could continue in operation nearly year-round, working underground, and there would be no short season work, as in the case of surface mining. After cassiterite was discovered in the area in 1903, the U.S. Geological Survey helped Krim, Rant, and O'Brien trace the source of the tin to the Cassiterite Creek area, the area for most of the load tin production from the Seward Peninsula. In 1907, the company was organized and incorporated. The owners performed all assessment work and eventually obtained patents to the ground. From 1904 to 1911, intermittent placer operations on the creek were produced 200,000 tons of tin concentrates. Much of this production was from residual debris at the foot of Greenstone Lode. George Jam of Seattle took a lease on the property in 1912, and a small pilot mill was erected and intermittently operated. About 8 tons of tin concentrates were produced. George Jam made lease payments for a couple of years, and the lease was abandoned in 1916. In 1918, James F. Halpin took a lease on the property and continued development until 1920, when he defaulted on the lease. A detailed examination and report of the Lost River Mine was made by F.C. Fearing in July 1920, published by Engineering and Mining Journal. And this is what they found. Deposits were still in the prospective stage. Tin was low grade and would require large-scale operations to be profitable. The place was devoid of timber. There were Arctic hurricanes with winds up to 120 miles per hour, and summer wind caused erosion and brought debris, but it had excellent water and good drainage. The mine was idle until 1928, when the National Tin Mining Company took a lease on the property and started development. Operations continued until 1950, when the lease was terminated. The corporation was terminated in 1942 because of non-payment of annual corporation tax. The reinstatement period expired in 1944. From 1904 until it closed, about 315 tons of ore were produced. This is a published summary of the U.S. government report on tin mining that was published in the Oregonian newspaper in Portland in May 1908. It's also an ad for purchasing stock for the tin company. Charles Rant, the secretary of the company, was trying to get people to make an investment. You could buy 200 shares for $100. The article emphasized that the mining men who discovered the ore were the officers and directors of the company. They staked 39 claims and transferred all of their holdings to the company. Since 1904, they spent over $20,000 of their money on it. More capital was needed to expand and update their equipment. To do this, they were offering 50,000 shares of stock to be sold at 50 cents per share. The owners of the mine were Charles Augustus Rant, William J. O'Brien, and Leslie L. Krim. They stayed in this, this little shack right at the end. Charles Augustus Rant was born in Michigan. In 1898, he joined the Klondike Gold Rush, crossing the Chilkoot Pass on foot, then down the Yukon by boat and by dog team to Nome and points north. Although looking for gold, Brant with O'Brien and Krim discovered a vein of tin and realized its potential value, and they filed a claim. Rant and his bride, Tenna Smith, established a home in Nome as a base from which he worked the mine. Their daughter Margaret was born there in 1906. When Charles's partner, William O'Brien, was away, Tenna helped set the dynamite charges in the mine. However, the mine proved too inaccessible for its yield to be marketable. After all funds advanced on potential sales were depleted, the mine was closed, and the Rants and O'Brien left for Washington State to await a better time. The Rants returned only once to Lost River in another effort to work the mine. Charles Rant died in 1943 and never realized any profit from the mine. William O'Brien was severely injured in a premature dynamite explosion in the mine in November 1905. He lost an eye and one hand was maimed. Here's how the accident was described in a 1920 Mining Journal article. One day in the dead of winter and while the Arctic blizzard was raging, O'Brien went up the side of the Considerate mountain to the entrance of the mine, leaving Rant in the cabin and Krim at work on the greenstone. While O'Brien was kneeling over a thawing kettle, 11 sticks of 40% gelatin exploded. It blew out one eye and temporarily blinded the other. It tore the flesh from thigh to ankle. It crippled one hand. Why it didn't kill him, heaven only knows. In this condition, he managed to grope his way back down the mountain through the storm and was finally found by his partners and taken to the cabin. Then followed a 120-mile journey to Nome, strapped to a dog sled, and months in the hospital there, and more months recovering later in Seattle. But O'Brien finally returned to the mines to begin again. Without adequate financial backing, but with grit enough to spare, O'Brien fought it out alone. By the time the author of this article visited in 1920, nearly 2,000 feet of underground work had been accomplished entirely by hand. In spite of all obstacles, O'Brien was still on the job. O'Brien could not get the financial backing and sold his holdings in the National Tin Mining Corporation in 1929. Leslie L. Krim was born in 1864 in Monroe County, New York. In the 1880s, Leslie and his brother Arthur came to Washington Territory to prospect for gold. They took up odd jobs and were surveyors for a while. In 1887, Leslie lived in Lewis County, Washington, and went prospecting in the area. There was no gold to be found, so in 1898, he and Charles Rant went to the Yukon. They joined a partnership with O'Brien and discovered tin. About 1909, Krim found out he was dying of cancer of the mouth. He refused all offers of medical aid in the belief that he could be cured through faith in the tenets of the Holy Rollers. He was well known because of his financial success in tin mining. In September 1910, his friends and acquaintances were concerned that he was slowly dying of cancer in a miserable shack in the Holy Roller camp on Ballard Beach near Seattle. They considered asking for an administrator of his financial affairs and medical attention for him. He was moved to Lopez Island with the Holy Rollers in 1911. When Leslie Krim died a few months later, he left over 100,000 mine shares to the Holy Rollers Church. His sanity was doubted and a long legal battle ensued. The Holy Rollers were sometimes called the Pentecostals. They were known for speaking in tongues and having revival events, which could go on for days or weeks. Shrieking and groaning at the religious service usually continued all night. There were complaints from neighbors over the failure to have sick members attended by physicians. At least one member of the colony was allowed to die without medical attention. On the 16th of March, 1911, Reverend Thomas Gourley and about their leader and about 175 men, women, and children left Ballard Beach on a scow and three launches headed for Lopez Island and the San Juan Islands off of Washington. Gourley believed that the world was going to end, so he moved his followers to Lopez Island, the only place he thought was going to be saved. Gourley purchased an old launch to convey Krim to Lopez and for Krim to use as his house until he died. Thomas Gourley was named executor and administrator of Krim's will. Krim's estate was valued at between $75,000 and $100,000, and that's in 1911 dollars. One half of the estate was to be distributed to widows, orphans, and deserving poor selected by Reverend Gourley, and the remainder invested so as to yield $500 a year for Leslie's mother, Miranda Krim, who was living in a poorhouse in Rochester, New York. The legal battle started soon after Leslie's death. Leslie's nephew, Leslie Travers, contested the will. He said Krim was not of sound mind when he made the will. Judge Frater said the will was good. An appeal was filed. Miranda Krim, Leslie's mother, died February 1912. Because of her death, an appeal was added to the appeal. The court reversed its decision. There was a new trial. Judge Dyckman ruled in favor of the Krim heirs. The decision was appealed. The final decision was made by Judge Dyckman on the 9th of July, 1913, that the estate would go to the heirs at law. There were a couple of other legal battles associated with the shares of the stock, but they're too complicated for this presentation. Gourley was a charismatic leader and had a large following, but not everybody was comfortable with his leadership style. When a colonist questioned Gourley's authority at a meeting, he was denounced as a servant of the devil and expelled. Slowly, Gourley's followers became disillusioned with him. There were claims that he was living a luxurious lifestyle outside of the colony. Gourley left the colony on Christmas 1920. He died in a train wreck in 1923 in Georgia. Although Gourley lost the court case, he received a generous amount for his work as administrator of the estate. It took a long time to finalize the estate because of the occasional payments made on the leases by Jam and Halpin over the years. And while they were waiting for the final lease from the National Tin Mining Company to be terminated. So that's what took so long to settle this case. Because the court case dragged out so long, much of the estate went to the administrators and lawyers and their descendants. After 43 years, the lawyers and administrators died, so the money that they would have received went to their descendants. And a large sum was paid out for court costs, and inheritance tax was about 50%. The final distribution was made in 1954, and Krim had died in 1911. was a lengthy trial and litigation over the years with spurts of activity waiting for the company to terminate. The final estate was $25,896 to the Krim heirs. And to make it more complicated, Miranda Miller Krim, Leslie's mother, died in February 1912, just 8 months after her son's death, and she did not have a will. And since 50% of the proceeds from Leslie's estate went to her, her estate could not be settled until his was. And her estate was settled in Washington State, even though she died in New York State and never was in Washington, but it was all tied up with Leslie's estate. Her final distribution was made after 1946. And needless to say, there wasn't much revenue left of the estate at that time. In 1983, work was revived on the mine and about 400 tons of tin was produced, but there were many challenges: financial, marketing, transportation, and ore treatment problems. So mining operations never really materialized. And that's the story of 3 prospectors, the Lost River Tin Mining Company, and a long court case. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. That was very interesting. A cautionary tale, to be sure.
Yeah.
Our next presentation, this one is about the Treadwell mine, comes to you from Rich Mattson of Juneau. Rich is a Gastineau Channel Historical Society board member, and he volunteers at the Juneau Douglas City Museum and the Last Chance Mining Museum. His presentation team includes Paulette Simpson, who, like Rich, is involved with the Treadwell Historical Society and Restoration Society, which they were both instrumental in forming, and Paulette also lives at what was once the Treadwell mine site. And Rich, are you ready to take the floor? Okay. Take it away. I can't hear anyone at the moment, but I will mute my mic.
Okay, I'll start again here. Well, thank you. Can you hear me now, Chris?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'll go ahead
Please
and start the timer now. Thank you.
Hey,
okay.
Rich, do you want to put your video on?
Sure. All righty. Okay. Well, thank you. This is a collaborative presentation by the Treadwell Historic Preservation and Restoration Society and the Gastineau Channel Historical Society. I'm Rich Mattson, and other members of our team include Paulette Simpson, Wayne Jensen, Jim Garrity, and Laury Scandling. We would first like to acknowledge the area of Alaska about which we are to speak is traditional land known as Blanket Ani. Okay, stand by, we're gotta make the PowerPoint go here. Okay.
The title of our presentation today is Treadwell, the impermanent town with a permanent impact, how a big mine on a little island launched Alaska's development and had a worldwide impact.
The most important event in Alaska's mining history was the development of the Treadwell group of mines. Thus stated Alfred Hulse Brooks, pioneering dean of Alaska geologists. But Treadwell's impact was much more far-reaching. The first in-depth documentation of the United States' newest acquisition is contained in the 1890 census, which credits the presence of the Treadwell mines and the stream of curious tourists for spurring the development of Alaska. According to the census,
Treadwell's stimulative effect upon mining and tributary industries created a freight movement, which enabled the steamship company to inaugurate regular trips and then blossom to lucrative excursion service. which has done more than any other means toward attracting capital for investment.
Indeed, Treadwell marked the turning point in Alaska's fortunes, jump-starting modern development in the territory nearly a generation before a shovelful of dirt was turned further north. The town and mining complex of Treadwell began with a rather unlikely start. In the summer of 1880, a Linkett leader, Cowie, guided prospectors Richard Harris and Joe Juneau up a creek, which discharges into the head of Gastineau Channel in northern southeast Alaska. There, they found gold. By the end of that year, a small gold rush ensued with prospectors arriving in the growing mining camp originally named Harrisburg, then Rockwell, and finally Juneau. By the summer of 1881, prospectors had claimed placer deposits, meaning gold-bearing gravel, and lode deposits, meaning rock-bearing gold, throughout the whole watershed, and others were fanning into the surrounding area to do the same. Gold had also been discovered a few miles south on Douglas Island across Gastineau Channel from Juneau, including the Paris claim staked May 1, 1881 by French-Canadian Pierre Eroussard. His claim included both gold-bearing gravels on Paris Creek and quartz rock outcrops from which the gold had eroded. He had drilled a short tunnel or adit into the quartz, but found the gold values too low. Enter carpenter John Treadwell, who had experience in both placer and gold mining. At the time, he was building a house for a San Francisco banker when his employer and other investors sent him north to investigate potential opportunities. Treadwell arrived in Juneau, but found the Gold Creek Basin fully claimed by that time and was disappointed in the low-grade ore found there. While waiting for the next steamer out, he met Eroussard and learned of his claim on Douglas Island. Eroussard was opening a store in Juneau, but lacked money to pay shipping on the goods arriving for him on that same steamer. Not wanting to return totally empty-handed to his employers, Treadwell went with Eroussard to inspect his claim and decided to buy it for about $400, which coincidentally was the amount needed by Eroussard for his freight bill. He also bought several adjoining claims and collected 22 bags of samples to take back to San Francisco before departing. Assays subsequently showed promising values up to an ounce of gold per ton, so the Alaska Mill and Mining Company was formed, with Treadwell getting a third ownership. Treadwell returned to the area in May 1882 to set up a 5-stamp mill, which uses heavy cylinders to crush the ore and to mine the claim, earning $11,000 that season. Early results also showed the mine could be profitable if worked on a larger scale. The next year, the mill was replaced with a 120-stamp mill, and an open pit excavation began to extract ore from what turned out to be a massive low-grade ore deposit. By 1885, production was up to 300 tons a day and consistently profitable. Nowhere else in Alaska was such development occurring. The season's returns had jumped exponentially to more than $250,000, and in 1887, the mill was once again expanded to 240 stamps under one roof, a world record. Beginning in 1883, more infrastructure was added: bunkhouses, mess halls, a wharf, assay office, machine shop, warehouses, fire protection, single housing for upper level employees, a very well-equipped foundry, and all was tied together by boardwalks and a narrow gauge railway called the Treadwell Express. The mill ran on direct water power from the Treadwell ditch. This ingeniously designed 5-foot wide, 18-mile-long conduit captured rain and snow melt from watersheds en route to the mine. The gravity-driven feed flowed to Treadwell via pipes, flumes, and culverts. The ditch originally supplied power to water wheels, then to steam plants, and finally to a hydroelectric plant. Steam power was also used during low water periods of summer drought or winter freeze-up. The successful enterprise captured the attention of the mining world and attracted capitalists. In 1889, an international group of investors, including the famed Rothschild brothers, incorporated the Alaska Treadwell Gold Mining Company and purchased the mines for $4 million, just 8 years after Treadwell had purchased the claim for $400. Treadwell sold his interest for $1.4 million and returned to California. The new company put its stock on the New York, Paris, and London stock exchanges to attract further capital. Meanwhile, the complex continued to expand with two other companies forming to mine adjoining claims on the same deposit. By 1906, 25 years after the first claim, the open pits were closed as miners followed the ore deposits ever deeper, creating extensive caverns or stopes supported by rock pillars left behind. Eventually, there were 4 mines, all connected underground. On the surface, they shared support facilities and were operated under the management of the Treadwell Company. Each mine had its own mill. A 5th mill of 300 stamps was added to the complex in 1899, again, the world's largest. At peak of operations in 1914, 960 stamps were pounding away 24/7. Up to 17 nationalities were represented in the workforce, primarily from Scandinavian, Eastern, and Southern European countries, but also from the British Isles, Canada, Australia, Japan, Philippines, and Mexico. Alaska natives were also employed in the mines, often their first experience with wage jobs. They typically remained in lower paid laboring positions. Wages were the highest for miners in the US, about 2.5 times their continental counterparts. In 1908, a skilled miner could average over $100 a month with room and board set at $1 a day. And the company provided a hospital, disability, and death benefits, actually unusual for the times. It attracted well-educated professionals and encouraged families too. Treadwell was Alaska's first company town, but it was considered quite progressive for the times. The company set up an extensive support system to attract and retain valued employees and reduce turnover. To that end, the company provided comfortable steam-heated bunkhouses for single men who comprised most of the up to 2,000 employees at its peak. Married and management employees were offered 3- and 4-bedroom steam-heated cottages for nominal rent, while the superintendent and his assistant had bigger houses appropriate to their position. In fact, the superintendent's house was said to be the grandest in Alaska, better than the governor's house. It also served as a hotel for visiting dignitaries, financiers, politicians, and mining engineers from around the world. There were 2 well-supplied mess halls, one seating up to 480 men at a time, and they were well known for their varied and generous meals. The provisions needed were staggering, up to 2,300 eggs, 6,000 pancakes, and 60 pounds of coffee each day, just for breakfast. The company even had its own dairy herd, complete with milkman. Company sponsored community events, such as athletic competitions and leagues, recreation facilities. They all provided a remarkable bond for the employees and residents alike. All employees joined the Treadwell Club at $1 a month, giving them 24-hour free access to club facilities, which included a heated swimming pool, a gymnasium, billiard and pool tables, a bowling alley, basketball, tennis courts, a library and darkroom, barbershop, and Turkish baths. An 800-seat auditorium provided a venue for frequent plays, dances, concerts, weekly movies, and other events. The 2-story company store boasted the largest and most varied stock of goods in Alaska, with prices often comparable or lower than in comparable Puget Sound cities to the south. The company built and maintained a school, provided its supplies and housing for the teachers, who also offered English language instruction to the immigrant miners. The size and scope of the complex gave a stabilizing permanence to the development of the surrounding area. Juneau and Douglas directly benefited from its payroll. Its infrastructure benefited the communities, including sharing its utilities and increased demand for transportation services for the region in general. Treadwell, besides building Juneau area into a world-class mining center, was a seminal springboard for development of Alaska and northern Canada before other gold or rail towns were even conceived. Alaska's tourism, energy, and transportation sectors all had their genesis at Treadwell. Beginning in the 1880s, miners who had grub staked themselves at Treadwell during the winter could be found scattered along the Yukon River Basin, contributing to that region prior to the famed Klondike Gold Rush and later discoveries in northern Alaska. Said a former Douglas resident,
For many, Treadwell was their first stop in Alaska. After a year or two in the mines or mills, these men felt financially able to continue further north and strike out on their own. In this springboard role, Treadwell became a major contributor to the development of interior Alaska.
Treadwell even offered free assay service for other prospectors as a means to check on other possible mineral developments. Treadwell provided men and the means for Alaska's future development. Treadwell also became a major tourist attraction early on. Regularly scheduled cruises to northern and southeast Alaska began in 1884, and Treadwell was a featured stop. In the first Alaska guidebook, author Eliza Sidmore touted the Treadwell mines as a local site as thrilling as glaciers and totem poles. In 1890 alone, 5,000 curious tourists visited Treadwell, guided by company personnel. Increasing transportation fueled expansion of the steamship fleets. As tourism became an increasingly important component of Alaska enterprise development, it brought attention to the region's resources and attracted capital investment. As Alaska's first and large industrial project, Treadwell created a steady increase in the demand for sailings by competing lines as the mine complex expanded. In 1910, the Treadwell Wharf was Alaska's busiest deepwater commercial port. And while recognized worldwide for its innovative low-cost methods which allowed profitability on low-grade ore, most of Treadwell's advantages were natural. First, the ore body itself was immense, extending over 2 miles in length and down at least 2,800 feet. The rock was hard enough not to require extensive timber supports, including inside the caverns, which saved money. Second, the abundance of water allowed for the pioneering use of cheap hydropower. Third, timber provided a ready supply to build needed structures and underground timbering. Fourth, the location on tidewater provided easy access for low-cost steamship delivery of goods, equipment, and exports of concentrates and gold bullion south. A fifth advantage was the steady supply of miners and managers from around the world enticed by high wages, comfortable living conditions, and cutting-edge technology. Between 1910 and 1915, Treadwell reached its apex, the largest gold mine in the world. Over its life, the Treadwell complex would produce over 3.2 million ounces of gold, valued at more than $67 million when gold was just set at over $20 an ounce, which today would amount to around $5.5 billion. Unfortunately, this story of success and major influence on Alaska's future came to an abrupt and untimely end. The method of excavating ore from large underground caverns relied on supporting the hollowed out areas by rock pillars. To save time and expense, caverns were left empty and tailings disposed at the shoreline. As workings went deeper, tremendous pressures built up on the surrounding rock. Underground caving began, resulting in ground subsidence and increased pressure on remaining rock. Financial stresses also affected the management decisions. By 1915, the ore in 3 of the 4 mines was getting leaner. To maintain profitability and pay dividends, support pillars in the upper workings were reduced or even removed. Saltwater was detected in the mine sump water as the mines were extended under Gastineau Channel. Investigations were made and a plan adopted to shore up the workings to prevent flooding, but it was too late and the luck ran out. On April 21, 1917, an extremely high tide drove seawater into the mines, and in a few short hours, 75 miles of tunnels below sea level were flooded, and portions of the town itself were sucked into the cave-in. Only one mine had been sealed off from the others. Fortunately, those underground on shift were evacuated, save one. An exodus of workers to other mines in the area to join World War I or to work in better paying war industries down south promptly ensued. Ironically, in that one blow, the future of Treadwell, which had launched the future development of Alaska, was severely truncated. One mine continued until it quietly closed in 1922. Dismantling surface facilities and equipment soon began to recover some cost. But the final blow came in the fall of 1926, when a major fire consumed the original Treadwell site. Virtually all wooden buildings were destroyed, leaving only a few concrete structures. In 1928, the Alaska Juneau gold mine across the channel purchased the remaining properties and assets, and Treadwell became a rapidly fading memory as we wait for our PowerPoint to catch up here. That happened when we were practicing the other day too. Well, there's the AJ. Are we good to go?
Well, you have just under 5 minutes, Rich, to finish up.
We will be finishing up within that time, as soon as we can get these slides back into position here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We had a lot of slides, and practicing it all worked out well. This is where my interest for Treadwell came from. I actually grew up playing in the old workings here, and I love to look at the old photographs, and this is where we came up with our presentation.
I'm just gonna have to run from this. You can still use your button.
Okay, well, there's the AJ mine. So they purchased the remaining properties and assets, and Treadwell became a rapidly fading memory. Today, nature is a reclaimed area. Treadwell, once a thriving modern community and the largest gold operation in the world, is a ghost town with only a few structures, rusty rails and metal left in the woods, and rotting pilings along the shore. Its 80 acres of tailings are a popular beach. The Treadwell property was purchased later by the city and borough of Juneau as a historical park. Structures have been preserved and interpretive signage placed along trails by the Treadwell Historic Preservation and Restoration Society. Perhaps Phil Bradley Jr., whose uncle Frederick Bradley was a longtime respected Treadwell mines manager in the area, said it best. Philip, who came to Treadwell in 1914 at age 10, in 1980 when he was 76, recorded his memories for the University of California at Berkeley.
The Treadwell mine creating all the commerce that a mine can, payroll, travelers, freight back and forth. That's the one that got steamships running to Alaska on a regular scheduled basis. And that was the real opening of the door to Alaska. That one mine did that. It gave the United States a 1,000-mile step out. The northernmost port was Seattle, and suddenly the territory of Alaska has a port 1,000 miles to the north.
So that was Treadwell, an impermanent town known worldwide in its time, with a permanent impact on Alaska's development. Thank you. And there you have it.
Hey, that was great. Thank you very much. I've always adored trips to Sandy Beach and to visit the trails around the Treadwell area, and I've always been curious. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, in fact, Paulette and her association have been instrumental in restoring the roof on that pump house that you see in the last photo, and in the old office building, as well as the signage that's down there. So we invite anyone in visiting the area to step over to Sandy Beach and check out the ruins and pick up a little bit more of our local history. Thank you.
Well, thank you both very much. Well, Karen and Angie, they are our final panelists today. Karen Brewster works for the groundbreaking oral history program and Project Jukebox at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Angela Schmidt is the head of the amazing Alaska Film Archives, also at UAF. And both Karen and Angie serve on the board of the Alaska Historical Society. And they are going to take us to Skagway and to the Chilkoot Trail today.
And I'm, of course,
Take it away.
Thanks,
having,
Chris.
can you guys see the PowerPoint? Because I'm having computer problems, of course.
Yes, I can.
Okay, you guys can see it fine?
Yes,
Okay, excellent. I do not trust,
it's the presenter view. We see all the slides on the side too, which is fine. That's totally fine.
no, that's not supposed to be what's happening. Okay, do this again.
Yeah,
Okay,
there it is.
there we go. Okay. Oh, yeah, you see, I'm having the same problem the other people are having, which is it's not advancing. So we will try it again. It's a day of oh, wait. Yeah, let me go back.
I have it up on my computer too, if you want me to try, but I mean, if other people are having problems, I don't know that mine will be any better.
I'm going to do what everybody else is doing. I'm going to close the PowerPoint and I'm going to open it again in the background. I'm going back to share my screen.
Okay, you guys, what's another name for fake gold? Shamrock.
Bum. Okay,
All right, we're up.
so you can see it in the one way, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Now
fine.
can you see it? And there. Is that working? Ah, sharing is paused. What's the problem? Something, I think the gremlins are just attacking us today. Okay. Can you see anything?
Yes, I can see the slide.
And it won't advance forward. Why is that? So Trish, how did you get yours to advance forward?
There it goes.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh.
Okay. Okay. So, hello. We all know the history of the Chilkoot Trail and the gold rush. So Angie and I are not going to talk about that today. Instead, this is the story of our hike. And thanks to Chris Allen, who shared the book Photographic Views en Route to the Klondike via the Skagway and Dyea Trails by F. LaRoche from 1897, we are able to take a bit of a then and now approach. Now, I was inspired to do the Chilkoot because I'd been working on an oral history project for Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park in 2018 and 2019. And obviously the trail was a hot topic in those interviews.
And I always wanted to hike the trail because I really wanted to participate in this great rush to the north that I'd grown up hearing about. I've long been captivated by Pierre Burton's 1958 Klondike Fever book. And, you know, the notion that 100,000 people set out at the turn of the century to reach the Klondike and Dawson City in Canada around the turn of the century when the gold rush was happening. And of those 100,000 people, maybe only 30,000 succeeded in actually reaching the Klondike. And only about half of those folks even bothered to look for gold. Maybe 4,000 found gold. And of those, only a few hundred got rich and fewer still managed to hold on to their wealth. So I was really intrigued by that notion and, you know, how all those people got caught up in that tide that was sweeping to the north. And I wanted to be part of that too. So that was, you know, some of my motivation for wanting to do this trek. And here we're seeing some of the sites from along the early parts of the Chilkoot Trail. You know, we see some of the older historical photos and some of the present day photos of Karen and I doing our hike. And I want to state that the beginning portions of the trail don't precisely follow the historical route that the gold seekers took. It follows pretty closely, but not exactly in their path. And that's so that modern day hikers, when they're hiking in the summertime, don't have to cross the Dyea River, and they have a safer hiking trail. So we didn't have to, cross the river like these women do here in this photo. And this is an example. This part was really intriguing to me here too, of how nature is consuming these artifacts that are along the trail. These artifacts are 100 years old. These were left by the original gold seekers who are coming up, along the Chilkoot Trail to reach the Klondike. And one of the rangers referred to this as being an outdoor museum. And so this is, it's like you're walking through time, and all these artifacts are still here, and many of them are just, decaying along with time. And that was a deliberate choice by the park to allow that to happen. That not all of these items are going to be saved and preserved in a museum with a roof over it. They're going to be left in place along the trail to suffer the ravages of time, and we get to watch that happen.
And I would just say, also with climate change, there's a question of, are things being more ravaged, or are they actually coming out more as certainly as the glaciers are melting higher up?
Yeah, as temperatures are getting warmer, a lot of the ice fields are melting away, and they're letting a lot more of these objects come into view or be exposed to sunlight and water, which is causing them to decay even faster. But the Park Service is keeping an eye on those ice patches. There's about 277 of them that they're monitoring. And they're seeing new items come to the surface every day. And some of the items that that are surfacing now due to global climate change are not just from the gold rush era, but from earlier eras too, when the Chilkoot and Chilkat Tlingit were in charge of the trail. And so there's a lot of those older artifacts that are surfacing now too.
And of course, because this is the Park Service, there are interpretive signs along the way. This one in particular, which refers to the Hosford sawmill, I was particularly excited about because I had interviewed Fred Hosford, whose father, Edward, had started the mill and built this logging road that this part of the trail goes along. And there's a photo of the family there that's on the interpretive sign. And so for me, it was really cool to see something that I'd heard about, and that kept happening along the way.
This is an example of how we're meeting some other hikers along the route. And I think this is all part of the adventure and all the journey that we're all having together while we're hiking the trail. And I assume, that the original gold seekers discovered this as well. It's like all of us along this trail are in a journey together. We're all in our own little world. I see that my internet connection is unstable, so I'm going to stop my video. We're apart from the rest of the world outside, and we're just kind of on our own journey together. And we're making these temporary, but oftentimes profound connections with other people through the shared experience. So that was a really special part of doing the hike that I noticed.
And I was going to say on that other slide about the Hosford sawmill, I was also excited to see that because it showed something of the history that was not about the gold rush, that there was other things going on in this area at the time, and certainly my oral history interviews showed that. But as you can see from these photos, there have been a few improvements in terms of the creek crossings that we had to do from the 1897 picture. And this bridge in particular, the suspension bridge, goes to the old Canyon City site. And I was particularly excited to see that because in my interviews, I had interviewed, excuse me, Jerry Watson, who had been the trail crew foreman from 1980 to 1995. And he told a story about having suffered a major head injury on this bridge project when the cable snapped. And it was an incredibly vivid and compelling story. So as soon as I saw this bridge, I knew exactly where we were and the issues that go in not only in hiking the trail, but in building the trail. And, you know, as we've said, there are lots of people who did this route before us, but for some reason here in the Old Canyon City site, all of a sudden I really felt the presence of ghosts and the connections with the then and now. And of course, maybe by this time I was just delirious from hiking in the hot weather, but as we came around a bend in the trail, I just got this feeling that there should be an old prospector walking out of the woods, or a woman in her long dress and white apron offering us something to eat or drink from her roadhouse. It was kind of eerie, but cool. And I think Angie kind of got into this, quote unquote, the spirit of it as I was having these visions. But again, it really helped us connect that, you know, there are things going on in this place before us. And this is a sheep camp. This was our second night out on the trail. And as you can see again from the photos, it looks a little different than it did. And this was a place that in my oral history interviews, I'd heard a lot about from rangers who had been stationed here and the trail crew who had built the campground and the cooking shelter and the ranger cabin, and how they'd moved the campground because of flooding. And it was very fun to actually, you know, see, oh, this is what they were talking about. And of course, you know, I wish I could have done the hike before the interview so I would have known what they were talking about and maybe have asked better questions, but that wasn't possible. That didn't happen.
That night in sheep camp was really memorable too, because I remember the park ranger telling us, you know, like, tomorrow is going to be the hardest day of your life, and it's going to be so hard, and you're just going to want to turn back, and you're not going to think that you're going to make it, but you will. So he was, you know, filling us full of the dangers or, you know, some of the problems, but also encouraging us too. And so that was really important. This photo here, I was keeping a journal along the way. You know, every night I would write a few notes in a little booklet that I brought along. And on this day I wrote, "Today was hot, too hot, and hard, too hard, but we made it, and we grabbed one of the last available tent sites. I wore shorts and traded my hat for a wet bandana today." So yeah, it was hot the whole time that we were doing this hike, and we had brought along all kinds of rainy weather gear and cold weather gear, which we carried all the way with us, all 33 miles we carried it, but we didn't really need much of that cold weather gear.
It made our packs heavier.
But it was worth it for the stunning views. I'm not complaining.
Oh, and this is the long hill. This is another example of, you can see how things have not changed too much on the trail in certain sections. But it's a perfect name for this part. It's from sheep camp up towards the scales, and it's called a long hill because it was a nonstop uphill. Anyway, it's very cool to see these historic photos and be able to say, oh, I know where that spot is. I've been there, and to have the photos to prove it. Another thing that kind of came to mind as I was hiking was sort of the difference between the stories we're told of history and actual history, and expectations that I had along the way. Like, I expected to see way more artifacts than I did. Anyway, this is an example of the difference in the story, that this is a sign in the remains of the old tram that ran at some point up to the pass or partway up. And I was like, what? There was a tram? You know, they tell us all this about how hard the Chilkoot was, and there's that classic photo of everybody hiking up the snowy pass. And nobody tells you that there was a tram that you could take. At least the rich and the women could take. Obviously, not everybody could afford it. And I think, you know, we're not told that because, you know, there's this whole pioneering frontier spirit idea. And, you know, you don't want to ruin that myth by saying, well, people could have gotten on the tram and gotten across, like quoted here, this Martha Kelsey in 1898. And I think that by this point, we might have actually been happy to take a tram. I'm not sure. It would have ruined the excitement, but
I wouldn't want to take that tram. Here's an example. You can see some of these items have numbers written on them. And those are National Park Service numbers, which helps the park, keep track of the objects that are still remaining along the trail. How fast are these objects decaying? Are they being moved in any way, either by people who are hiking along and picking them up and moving them, which they shouldn't be doing, or are they being, moved by nature, snow melt and so on. So I suppose this is an aspect of the outdoor museum part of the trail. And you might think that, seeing these numbers would kind of take you out of the experience. But for me, it just reminded me that, oh, these are important objects, and I can, take pictures and I can look at them and I can consider them, but, definitely shouldn't touch and definitely shouldn't move them.
Yes, and as historians, this one picture with all these artifacts piled up together on the rock where everything is now taken out of their context, is horrifying. That, but I think, the general public, they think they're helping to preserve it and putting it all together in one spot. And then, everybody can see it easily and you're not wandering off the trail. So
kind of reminds me of Alaska Land in Fairbanks.
yeah, it shows, different perspectives on what is appropriate. And also, like Kennecott in the old days, people came in and took things and they walked away with them in their pack. And now that the Park Service is managing, they, give you a long lecture about not taking things and not moving things and all that. So hopefully that is improving. So here we are at what is called the scales. And we were standing here looking at it and I looked up and I thought, oh, we're going to go up that one on the right that I have marked there in blue. That looks, like the easy way. That's how we're going to go. Well, somebody else came up and said, no, you're going up the left side, which is the one marked in right, which somewhat shocked me. And again, it's the question of, that left side, the right side, the blue one, I've since discovered actually was an alternate route called the Peterson Pass route, Peterson Trail. But again, it's not what we're told about. Everybody knows, you go up the steep rocky section and the golden staircase and all that. And so that's what we did. And, nowadays also the Park Service marks the route with these orange avalanche kind of markers. So they go up and because the rocks are moving. And so they'll go up and mark what they think is the safest, best way up through that boulder field. So that was a bit of a surprise. And you can see with the old photo, it looks somewhat similar.
I think that photo is a little bit deceiving too, the current photo that you took there, because it just makes, it looks kind of easy, doesn't it? But it was a long slog up that hill.
And when you're standing at the bottom, it does not look easy. And thank goodness I had Angie to follow so that I didn't have to stop and look every time and get dizzy. So here, this shows you again that, this is what it looks like. Pretty steep and big rocks. And it's very similar to how it used to be.
I think this photo shows, what you were just talking about there. You said that you were following me along, but if I was pulling you along, you were definitely pushing me. I think this was a team effort. And, I don't know that I could have made it without your encouragement. So it helps to have teamwork here.
Yes.
And, before we were starting our hike, there was we heard over the radio that a girl had broken her leg in this section here. So, it's not a joke. But there were definitely people of all abilities who were going up over the pass. And I read somewhere that about 3,000 people annually go through this pass.
And I'm thrilled that we did it when it was sunny and dry. I would not have liked doing this with it slippery and wet like so many people do. And you do think about, well, maybe it would have been easier in the winter with the steps carved into the snow. I don't know. But we did it. We made it to the top. And this is the Canadian border. And there's a cabin there. And, thank goodness we didn't have to carry shovels and big boxes of things or pianos or wood stove parts, cast iron stoves. And then from here, it is 4 miles to the next camp. And boy, it was a long 4 miles. I'll tell you, this was a long day. This was like a 12-hour day. And then this is going down into the Canadian side, Crater Lake, which again, you can see very similar then and now. And we got lucky with doing this in August that the snowfield, there's often a snow patch up here, and it had receded. And again, thank you to climate change, it's smaller than it used to be, and we didn't have to glissade ourselves down with an ice axe.
Yeah, this is a good photo showing some of the little cabins where we can cook our meals at. You know, back in the old days, they had the tents, and you know, in the modern day version is that we have these little wooden shelters where people can gather in. And it was really nice to, you know, sit and visit with other people who were hiking the trail. Again, people of all ages, you know, all the way. I think we talked to a 9-year-old here at this cabin, and you know, people in their 60s and 70s for sure. And I'm sure that that was, you know, true of the early gold seekers as well, that they were meeting all these people along the way. And it was interesting to see how different people were having the experience. I mean, some people were just having this light, fun, you know, jaunty experience. They were just doing it all in, you know, 2 days. And other people were taking longer to do the trail. It was harder for them. And you could see that if you had any setbacks or any loss of confidence, or I don't know, if you had an injury or something, that it might really turn your fun, light experience into something that was a little darker. So we're all in this journey together, but then we're each, you know, having individual journeys as well.
And this is called Happy Camp, and we know why it's called Happy Camp. It's, you're very happy to get there. And
Very happy to get there.
this old photo is great because these are the same women who are crossing the river in the first picture. It's this group of actresses, and they are now in slightly more appropriate clothing. And the caption on the photo actually mentions that that they have changed into more appropriate attire for the
Much more practical.
much more practical.
We saw a lot of wildlife on the trail. I kept track in my notebook that I was carrying along with me. We saw salmon. We didn't see any bears. We saw bear scat, ermine, rock ptarmigan chicks, Arctic ground squirrels, numerous waterfowl, unidentified waterfowl, some nesting waxwings, caribou. There was a caribou along the trail there, and loons. So lots of wildlife.
And thank goodness no bears.
And thank
So
goodness.
this is
no bears.
this is Lake Lindeman, which is famous. That was a big camp and, you know, town on the original Chilkoot Trail, and you can see, you know, that in the old photo. And then this is where we stopped for a little break, and it's a beautiful spot. And there is a campground there, but we did not camp there. We went on to Bear Loon Lake, and I find it interesting that originally they had a nice hotel, the Lindeman Hotel. How lovely. Whereas we had a tent, but we had really nice views from our tent, especially at the last one along the way.
I don't know. I think our tent was nicer than the Lindeman Hotel there.
So here we are at Lake Bennett.
I really like this quote. It's definitely appropriate.
I would never do it again, but knowing what I know now, I'd never miss it. So we made it. This is at Lake Bennett. And Angie had some thoughts about the people coming off the train at this point that we met.
Yeah, I guess we didn't get a photo of the people coming off the train. That was very interesting after we had hiked for, 5 days now to get here and feeling kind of rugged and definitely in need of a shower. And then seeing the people off the train, just wearing their light shoes and street clothes. They just seemed like they were kind of, otherworldly, coming from some alien planet. It was kind of a shock to the system to run into, normal people again.
I don't know who's normal.
I like this photo. This is the St. Andrew's Church, Presbyterian Church. It was built around 1899 through 1901. And I think it's amazing that it is still standing today. It's a federal heritage building in Canada. And I was impressed with all the fire suppression systems that are around this church to prevent it from ever, catching fire. it was neat to see the the effort that they're putting into preserving this structure, even though we couldn't go inside of it. So I hope it lasts. It's definitely something that I see at the film archives in a lot of films from people who are in this area. You know, that church is very recognizable. And then here we are catching the train at Lake Bennett, going back to Skagway. And I don't know if you can play that little clip from the film archives. Oh yeah, there we go. This is a film from 1970. And this is sort of a recreation of us pulling out of, you know, Lake Bennett and heading back to Skagway. It's kind of funny in my head, Karen, I remember us being at the train station and that it was painted yellow, but I see now looking at it at the most recent photo that in fact it was painted red. But it's funny how memory works that way. Anyway, one of the things that I most appreciated about doing this hike was just the connection that it gave me to the people who have done this before, and then this sense it gave me of how important it is to preserve history. And, you know, working at the film archives, I see lots of these films from the area of Skagway and, you know, the White Pass and Yukon Route Railroad. And it just helped give me a connection to that and to the people who've been on that journey in the past.
And Angie, wasn't there something that you got a donation after the hike that you knew?
Yeah, that film was from that big donation of films. So that little clip that we saw, that's from Keith Norrie. When he was growing up, he worked on the White Pass and Yukon Route Railroad, and his father worked on the railroad as well. So yeah, it was neat that big collection of films came in right after we had finished doing the hike. I'm gonna try turning on my camera again. We'll see what happens. Just to, you know, be able to have that connection and have that understanding and be able to recognize those sites too.
Well, yeah, and it was interesting. Like I had the connection from the oral history interviews from before the hike, and then Angie kind of got these connections going afterwards. So it went both ways. And as we said, you know, Angie got me up the steep part, and I got her down over to Happy Camp by encouraging her along.
Dangling chocolate out in front of me.
Where there's a sign that says 2 miles, and we're like, that was way more than 2 miles.
It had to be at least 20.
That, you know, it really is teamwork, and how also, you know, Angie and I have been co-workers for a long time, but this was the first time we'd done something kind of outside of work, certainly anything like this. And that the friendship and camaraderie we built as co-workers, it helps us as friends, but it also helps us in the work we do. And so it was just really great fun. And we did joke around that 2 introverts, what were we going to do, you know, 5 days on the trail together, and, you know, 13 hours driving, or 13 hours plus driving back and forth. And I think we talked nonstop. So
yeah,
we
absolutely.
had a great time, and we were very fortunate to have such wonderful weather.
That's wonderful. What a great presentation. Thank you both very much. We're going to move on to question and answer discussion. And wow, there's a lot of material we've covered. If any of the attendees have questions about Seward Peninsula Tin or Treadwell Gold or the Chilkoot Trail, we'd like to hear from you now.
So Chris, would you like me to read through what's in the chat to add those questions? Or do you
Yes,
want-
please.
Okay. So Chris is asking Rich, are there other photos of Mr. Treadwell? I find they are rare.
There are certainly hundreds just on Vild alone. In fact, that's my source to go to. But within the Alaska State Historical Library, you go to the source collections, and there literally are thousands. I'll let Paulette talk to that too.
John Treadwell, right? Are you asking about John Treadwell or Treadwell?
Yes, the man who started it all.
Oh, okay, actually, that is the only photograph in existence. And I know I've looked for years. And when John Treadwell left Alaska, he went to Northern California, where he started 2 other company towns, the one of Tesla, a coal mining company, and Carnegie, which was a brick and pottery works. And he has a longer history in Northern California than he does in Alaska. But even searching those newspapers, we can't find any other photographs of John Treadwell except for the one that was taken in Southeast Alaska back in probably we think that one is around 1884, 1885. He was a recluse. And at one point, we know he had been burned in a fire and didn't want himself photographed. So the one that you saw here is the only one. We've searched the archives and everywhere.
Yes, thank you.
And Ron Inouye has a question for Trish. And Trish, you'll have to unmute yourself to answer. What was the demand for tin during the life of the mine? Was it international or domestic?
Well, it was, well, both, but domestically, we weren't producing much, but we were using, I think, about 46% of the tin that was mined in the whole world. So they really wanted them to be successful in the mining so that we wouldn't have to get it from other countries. And it changed over time too, because of World War I and World War II. But those mines just didn't turn out, weren't successful.
Thank you. And Trish, you asked about actresses on the trail. As somebody else said, were they really actresses or they were, saloon girls? And
yeah, I didn't think about that.
that they were, maybe going over to Dawson to be, in one of the saloon, shows or something. I think that's what they were, as actresses.
Yeah.
And yes, Carol, they were Harlequin ducks. I identified them afterwards, but they were cool. They were playing in the, actresses. Okay. Sue is asking, Angie, you and I, how long were you coming over the boulders on the way to Happy Camp?
12 days. It took 12 days to get over that hill.
I can't tell you the mileage. I'd have to look at that map. That whole
That
day,
was a 12-hour day, though. It was at least a
12-hour day from Sheep Camp to Happy Camp, and I think it's only like 7 miles total. I don't think it's very long, but
And most of it was after we got over the pass.
right.
Like
But
that part it seemed not easy. I don't mean that, but I was definitely engaged. And then I was ready to be done, and we still had that 4 miles to go, and that was a long 4 miles.
Yeah. So other people who've hiked the trail might be able to chime in. But as I say, it's Sheep Camp and it's the long hill, which is, a few miles all up to the base of the boulders and then all the way up the boulders, which is probably not very long, but it's all steep rock, climbing around rocks. Let's see. Did Treadwell have a bank or was quote unquote corporate script used? Was Douglas Sin City?
As we mentioned briefly, Treadwell was a true company town, and it had neither churches or saloons, certainly not a bank. In fact, for the first few years, they even had to get their mail from Douglas. Later, they got a post office. So Douglas was Sin City. In fact, because of Treadwell, Douglas itself was wide open. It was running 24 hours a day because not only Treadwell miners, but across the channel, the Alaska Juneau mine, the Alaska Gasno mine, and there are a lot of mines up the Gold Creek. And the ferries would run late at night, and they had on Front Street of Douglas, or First Street actually, you look at the 1914 Sanborn insurance map, and there's like 40 female boarding houses, little cribs. So Douglas had it all.
Okay. There's a couple questions in the Q&A panel, which are separate. Tom is asking Trish, is the Lost River mine near Tin City, south of Wales on the Seward Peninsula?
It's in that area. It was on the Cassiterite River or Creek, but near the Tin River too. I'd have to look at a map to point it out, but one of those, a couple of those slides had maps that showed approximately where it was. I could send whoever wants to know, I could send them a map if I have their email or something.
Okay, yeah, it was Tom Kazaya.
Oh, okay.
And then Angie, David Ramser is asking us about the permit and reservation requirements for the Chilkoot.
Well, I think you handled most of that.
It's a
And
bit,
I'm ever so grateful to you.
it's a bit intimidating. But yeah, you have to make a reservation, and they restrict how many people go over the pass every day. So you have to tell them the dates you're going to do the hike and where you're going to camp. You have to camp in certain campgrounds, which is what kept me from wanting to do the hike for a long time. I didn't like the idea of having to be told where to camp, but you know, they're doing that to preserve the area so that everybody's not going they concentrate the impact, so to speak. And so, yeah, you go through the Park Service and you make a reservation, and actually it's done through Parks Canada, and you had to do it by telephone. You couldn't do it on the internet.
It was very old fashioned,
Yes,
but it was awesome.
and there was this absolutely wonderful woman with this lovely French accent on the other end of the phone who was amazing, and how she managed all the calendars and, oh, I want to go this day and stop in these camps, and because you have to coordinate with catching the train at Lake Bennett to get back to Skagway. And so it was amazing that they have it all figured out. And thank goodness we did it in 2019, where we could go the whole way last year. And this year, you can't cross the Canadian border. So it was very different. But yeah, it's somewhat intimidating, but it all works out. And it wasn't as crowded on the trail as I thought it would be, that, people spread out. And Ron is asking us where you store your food. No, we
I
didn't.
ate all of it.
Yeah, we stored it right here. You don't have to put it up in trees, Ron, because at each of the established campsites, they have bear-proof storage lockers. So you put all your food and anything smelly in there for the night. So that was very helpful. Even the one Deep Lake used to not have a bear storage place, and they put it in the last few years, so we didn't have to throw a bag over anything. And then Tom, people climb up the pass and turn around. Yeah, that's what they were doing.
Mhm.
They were just
The American side is open for day hiking or overnight hiking. I think for overnights you have to register for that, but it's open for that.
But you couldn't go across the border.
Right, you cannot cross the border. Don't do that.
And now now they've opened it, maybe, I don't know. So next year, hopefully, but yeah.
I have a question
Yes, Angie?
for Rich, real quick. Yeah, Rich, you showed so many magnificent pictures of the Treadwell mines. Do any of that still exist?
I'm sorry, did you?
Oh,
Can you say it again?
How much of
oh,
the
sorry. I was asking a
infrastructure-
question for Rich, and I'm gonna.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, I understood you asked if there were still photos left of the Treadwell mine. Is that correct?
So sorry. Yeah, my internet is cutting out in and out again. You showed so many photographs of the magnificent Treadwell mine, all of those magnificent facilities and buildings and structures. Do any of those structures still exist?
Very few. The 1926 fire basically wiped out all the wood structures of the original Treadwell mine site itself, which is now the City and Borough Park. We showed at the very end the restored new office building that was built, one of the few ones that was built of concrete. When you take the trails through the park, you see the concrete foundations of the 300 stamp mill, a few, the steam plant, and a few other places, but there's very little left. When you go past the cave-in, you see a few more structures, but and I used to play in that in the 50s and 60s as a kid. They had a foundry that was still there when I was first playing around. That got destroyed in the mid 60s with the fire. So, and there's still a refinery. They did have a refinery that they smelted the precipitates down from the cyanide plant to gold bullion. And we used to call that the Alamo because it looked like a northern version of the Alamo. So there's very little left there, but except a few metal or concrete structures.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for this session. I'm going to give Rich and Paulette the award for most slides fit into 20 minutes. Very impressive, and you all did wonderfully. And thank you for participating today. I think this was great. And we're going to start again at 3:30, which is in about 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So don't go away.
we got a little bit of a late start on this session with our technical issues. So, you know, we have a little bit of a shorter break, or we can start a little bit later on the next session. And given all our technical difficulties, if all of you are going to still participate at 3:30 and you want to just stay, you know, logged in, don't leave the session, I'm just going to leave it open. We'll turn off the recording though.